You're welcome back. Now, today, Parliament unanimously called for sanctions in the wake of the killing of Saudi journalist Jamal Khashoggi in the Saudi embassy in Turkey earlier this month. The minority and majority sides spent hours condemning the act, but right here at home, they were silent on attacks against journalists. With the latest on JoyNews political reporter Kwesi Parker-Wilson, the parliamentarians' call comes at the back of reports that 11 journalists in the country have been assaulted in the last 10 months. Here is a report chronicling some of these attacks on journalists and media houses.
Incidents of attacks on journalists from January 2017 to October 2018. February 27, 2017, Kotoko Express reporter Gideon Butchie physically attacked by a fan and steward of Ash Gold during a football match. March 6, 2017, soldiers attacked freelance journalist Kendrick Ofei during Ghana's 60th Independence Day celebration at the Independence Square. October 18, 2017, newspaper office attacked by rampaging youth of Kumasi. December 21, 2017, NPP security guards physically assault journalists from TV3, City FM, and Ghana Web. They were brutalized by security guards for covering the protest at the premises of a party headquarters. March 27, 2018, Latif Idris brutalized by police at the police headquarters and left with a fractured skull. 4th May 2018, Adom FM's Ama Sechiwa slapped by NPP firebrand Hajia Fati at party headquarters. July 19, 2018, GH1 cameraman Reynold Datsi beaten to pulp at Ayawaso in Ashanti region. October 29, 2018, JoyNews' Kwesi Parker-Wilson slapped by John Mahama security detail and left with an infected eye.
So those are just a few of the cases. Well, in the case of JoyNews reporter Parker-Wilson, his assault, Chief Executive Officer of the Ghana Chamber of Telecommunications, Ken Ashigbe, wants media houses to boycott functions of the National Democratic Congress until justice is served for him.
About 21 incidents that have happened.
Of assault on journalists.
Of assault on journalists. And you find out that for all of them, not even one have we really seen resolution. I remember on the case of Latif, when the GJA, and I think for that particular one, we need to give GJA credit, called a press conference and told the police that we were not going to report the police till you resolve this thing. A few days afterwards, I know there was an event where the West African Media Foundation were supposed, we went there, whilst the GGA had called us. I remember when I was managing director of Graphic, one of my staff was assaulted by Asamajan and his brother in Kumasi, and I ordered as publisher that we were not going to cover them. Even the NMC came hard at me, that why would we do that?
Why are you boycotting?
Yes, till we get to the point where we say that never would we allow this to happen, never are we going to tolerate that. So the NDC, the MPP, the police, the military.
You're suggesting that we should boycott John Mahama's campaign?
We need, you see, we need to get to the point where whoever does that, we tell you that all of us, not only just the media house that was attacked, but we say that till you repair this, we are not going to deal with it. How on earth would anybody tell me that in a semi-military organization, one person does this and nobody knows who it is? How many hours after? It is just because they know that for the media beats them. Oh, they'll come back again. You know what I mean? We've sold ourselves so cheap. We're forgetting that we are the fourth estate of the realm. We are more powerful than, any sword. But we don't take this seriously enough. And I think it's about time we said no.
Well, in Parliament Wednesday, the MP's silence on the assault of Ghanaian journalists was very loud when they took the opportunity to condemn the killing of Jamal Khashoggi and criticize the Saudi government's infringement on the freedom of expression. Listen.
There are 9 questions that have remained unanswered about the death of this journalist, Mr. Speaker. The first one is, was Khashoggi really considering returning to Saudi Arabia? That is number 1. If this was just a discussion, why did it take 15 men to travel to Istanbul for a meeting? Mr. Speaker, the third question is, why did the Saudi group include a forensic expert and members of the security force?
Demanding that the perpetrators be tried. They be tried in accordance with law and are made to pay the ultimate price. I consider the murder an affront to freedom of expression and an affront to the independence of the media. He was only contributing to the development of the world through his writing, espousing what he believed in, what he saw. And Mr. Speaker, circumstances of his murder, there are various attempts to cover up. We will not accept the cover up, and this parliament should not accept the cover up.
So why are the politicians seemingly turning a blind eye to matters here in Ghana? Joining me in the studio, hopefully with some answers, is Sam George. He is Member of Parliament for Ningo Pram. Most grateful for your time here. So today we heard your colleagues addressing, issues affecting international journalists. Given that journalists here in Ghana, have been assaulted in the last few weeks, it's very strange that you are silent on that. How do you respond to critics who say that, you're turning a blind eye to issues affecting your own people?
Well, let me say a very good evening to our viewers. And let me say that the critics are entitled to hold any view that they consider. However, their view does not represent the facts or the reality. Parliament of Ghana has on several occasions denounced the brutality against not just journalists, but any citizen of the Republic. I mean, be it police officers like ASP Nanka Bruce or members of the media fraternity. For example, when there was an attack on journalist Latif Idrisu of Multimedia, Parliament did speak about it. We spoke about it, we condemned it, and called for an investigation into the matter. So it would be unfair to Parliament to suggest that Parliament is silent when on issues of brutality against journalists. I mean, we are very vociferous on issues involving excessive use of force against any citizen of the Republic.
And has your attention been drawn to the case involving my colleague, Kwesi Parker-Wilson, who was assaulted by former President Mahama's security detail? Of course, we know that the former president has rendered an apology personally to Kwesi Parker-Wilson, but what do you make of it?
Well, let me state for the facts again that it is incorrect to suggest that Kwesi Parker-Wilson was assaulted by members of President Mahama's security detail. That is not the fact of the matter.
These are people who were protecting the president, they say.
No, that again is not proven. Okay, there were quite a number of people there, including people who had joined.
So how would you describe these people? Would you describe them as party supporters?
There were supporters
activists
of the party, there were sympathizers of the party, there was the former president himself, there was his security detail in there. And I know for a fact that when the incident happened at Soweto, from Soweto the campaign continued to Wejagbawe. At Wejagbawe, when the president's information or attention was drawn to it, that was about 30 minutes after the incident. He personally interacted with Parker and extended his apologies to him, and actually asked him if he could identify from within his security detail which of his security men had done the assault, if any had. And my information is that Parker at the point said that he could not point out any of them. So that's why I'm saying that it is not fair to the campaign of President Mahama to suggest that his security detail assaulted a member of your staff.
So if it's not the security detail, who then assaulted him?
Well, that's a matter that is open for investigation. But for me, the bottom line here is that the campaign was swift in establishing the fact that there had been an assault. It was regrettable, apologized for it, extended support in terms of medical assistance to the affected journalists. And for me, I believe that was a responsible thing to do vis-a-vis what we have seen in the past, where people or journalists or ordinary citizens are attacked at political functions or state functions, and there is a level of denial and a lack of taking responsibility. I believe that it's a welcome step that if these situations, as regrettable as they are, the ideal situation is not to have them happen. But when they do happen, we must be responsible enough to own up to them and say that, look, we're going to take steps to ensure that this does not happen. Own it, apologize for it, and move on. So I think that it is unfair to try to make the Parker case. In fact, the Parker case is a test or a test case of how to handle political parties should handle such instances, unfortunate instances, as and when they do happen.
I see. That's interesting. But how would you suggest that we bring closure to Parker's case? Because as of now, nobody has been arrested.
Well, I mean, we as a and when I say we, it's because I endorse President Mahama's campaign, and President Mahama's campaign has made it clear that they are willing to work with Parker. If Parker can identify any of the members of the security detail that are assigned to President Mahama, or he can identify, I mean, I don't know if a police case has been lodged. If a police case has been lodged, we need to find out the assault, by my understanding, happened within
I do understand
the administration
that the police
building.
case has been
lodged.
lodged.
Fantastic.
Yes.
So it happened within a building. It didn't happen on the outside. It happened on the 7th floor of a building and at Pentecost University. Do we have CCTV cameras there? Can we get access to the tapes? Because as far as I'm concerned, the campaign of President Mahama is willing to cooperate with multimedia and Parker Wilson to resolve that issue. We've extended support we've extended our willingness to support with regards to his medical bills.
Right.
A statement was issued by the campaign. The president himself has engaged him and extended his apologies. I have personally spoken to Parker because Parker is a personal friend,
right,
and also expressed apologies on behalf of the campaign to him. And Parker himself will tell you that several members of the president's entourage have called him to check up on him and see how he's doing. However, if we can establish the identity of whoever it is, we will not shield the person. And President Mahama showed that instantly. 30 minutes, he said, look, point out the person to me and let's take out disciplinary measure. Unfortunately, we weren't able to have that done at the time. But if today there's a possibility, if there's a CCTV footage that we can use, or if Parker can identify whoever it is, I'm sure that the campaign will not shield that person.
Let's talk about politicians and journalists, because there's been some research which shows that politicians are the worst offenders in many of the cases affecting journalists. So in many of the cases, in fact, they point to two main parties, which is the NDC and the NPP. So what do you think can be done to ensure that, you know, journalists are safe in the hands of politicians or the people aligned to these two political parties? Well,
I think, again, it is unfair to generalize and say politicians are behind attacks on journalists, because except there's a case in reference that you can draw my mind to, I'm yet to see a case where
there is some research that has been done. We are unable to readily bring you those details.
If you get, let me land. What I'm about to say is that I'm yet to see, my mind, none readily comes to mind where a politician, properly so-called, be it a member of parliament or a minister of state, physically assaulted a journalist. What you have are sympathizers of political parties. So when you say politicians are behind the attacks, that's where I have a problem.
But if your supporter is attacking a journalist, you should be taking responsibility for that.
Well, there's some level of responsibility. I mean, there's some vicarious liability that you can extend to the politician. However, whoever is carrying out that act must not be shielded by political parties. And so when we fail to identify and name and shame these individuals for who they are, these are grown men over 18 years old, okay, who are carrying out these assaults. But we want to lump them and hide them behind the shield of political parties. Then you have these instances where they get away with it because then it becomes a political thing. But when we are able to segregate them, pull them out behind take off the veil of the political party, because many of these people do not do this on the instructions of any political person. I mean, the case of Parker, President Mahama did not ask anybody, be it a security person or a foot soldier or a party sympathizer, to attack anybody. And so as and when you are able to identify the individuals behind this, and we name and shame them, and we allow the laws, we have laws on assault and battery, when we allow those laws to work, it would serve as deterrent enough.
Very quickly, you may have seen the montage we played earlier, but over the last 10 months, 11 journalists have been attacked. You're a communications specialist. How do you think we should be dealing with the situation going forward?
I think that it's a regrettable situation because Ghana is one country that has a lot of freedoms when it comes to our media landscape. But I think that, again, that I would prefer two solutions. One has to do with the management of political events. Many times political events are handled on an ad hoc basis. There's a plan. But when we hit the road, things get messy. It gets very you know, it becomes very fluid. And if you listen to the Parker case, it was in that movement that this happened. Okay, but if you look at other jurisdictions, I mean, if POTUS is moving, the President of the United States is moving, there's a certain corridor around him where nobody, irrespective of whether you're a journalist or not, you don't get into that corridor. If we're able to establish such parameters here around our operations, around our security operations, and then the second suggestion is media people are able to understand that there are security implications around certain prominent persons you're covering. And so certain proximity may not be achieved on a campaign trail, because at that point in time, the security man's focus is on protecting his principal. You, as a journalist, is interested in getting your story. However, you must be mindful of the fact that the security man doesn't know you as a journalist. Even if you were wearing a tag, in the heat of the moment, he may not have the presence of mind to be looking out for your tag. He sees a potential threat to his principal. So if journalists are able to keep a safe distance within which they can do their work, as you see in other jurisdictions, and security personnel here are also given the requisite training to be able to understand that, yes, even in light of potential threat, you must not be high-handed in the way you protect that.
In the case of POTUS, the U.S. president, even though there's a certain parameter, you can't go beyond that. Usually after the interactions and the how do you call it,
the press briefings, basically, or when he's engaging them.
They brief the press afterwards, so they have, you know, the opportunity to ask questions. That doesn't happen here.
So that's what I'm saying, that we need to look at the framing of our political programs. So if the journalists who are embedded by the media houses in the campaign of President Mahama, for example, know that at the end of every day there will be a briefing, then you do not need, because in this instance, Parker was told, my information is that the president was going to have a private meeting with the authorities of Pentecost University to thank them for allowing him use the facility. So it was supposed to be a private meeting, no media allowed. Okay, if Parker knew that there was going to be a briefing at the end of the whole tour, he may not have insisted or tried to insist to get in there, and would have avoided all of this. So if we can manage the processes of handling political programs, and media people know that even if there's no press briefing, the press by the principal himself, but a press attaché or a spokesperson is going to brief them at the end of the day and put out speaking points or speaking notes are handed out to the journalists. It would help us in managing all of this, because I think going forward we need to avoid instances where journalists in pursuit of their story end up having to get assaulted by security men who are also doing a legitimate job of protecting their principal.
All right, many thanks for your time. And that is a Member of Parliament for Ningo Prampram, Sam George there.